you really start thinking about it, people think, well, gee, you know, the theory of evolution is a Johnny-come-lately theory. But we have had the concept of change, gradual change in species for longer than we've understood that germs cause disease, and for longer than we've understood the idea that matter is subdivided into units that we call atoms. So, interesting perspective. With that, let me introduce our three speakers. The first speaker tonight is going to be Paul Decelles, and Paul is on the faculty here at Johnson County Community College. His training is in entomology and evolutionary biology, appropriate for his speaking tonight. He has a PhD from the University of Kansas. Aside from biology, his interests include the relationship between science and religion, also appropriate for this evening's presentation. He also serves on the board of Kansas Citizens for Science and runs several blogs, including a science blog at the Lawrence Journal World called Dangerous Ideas. And this evening, Paul's topic will be some myths and misconceptions about evolution. The second, and Paul, did you raise your hand? Okay, there we go. So Paul will be our first speaker. Our second speaker will be Josh Rosenau, and so it sounds like he has a following already. That's not surprising, because he has the blog, and has had before he moved away, called Thoughts from Kansas. And he is currently on the staff at the National Center for Science Education, and is in charge of public information programs. Public Information Program Director. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he has a official title, but we enjoy the fact that he blogs about our activities back here. David Burress, who is a retired economics professor from KU, was a founding board member for Kansas Citizens for Science, and is on the board of Ad Astra, which is a progressive Kansas policy think tank.
I just introduced myself by sliding, because I've already introduced by the beginning of this, so I'm not going to play that. But I did want to mention my Ad Astra Institute a little bit, because I always have to get a plug-in every time I get a talk, in the hopes that somebody will join my organization. We're a 501c3, which means if you give us money, you can take it off your income taxes. We're a membership organization, which means we'd like you to join. And we do state-level public policy from a progressive point of view. And we like to think that we're objective and truthful. But we do policy analysis, which means we talk about what should government do and what are the impacts. We also do strategy analysis, which means what should progressives be doing to do something about Kansas government. And we do communications analysis, which means we talk about how do you form messages, how do you frame things, how do you talk to people. And the talk I'm giving today is kind of a combination of communications analysis and strategy analysis. I want to talk about how to conceptualize the groups who are opposed to science education. And I want to talk about what words and names should be used. It makes a difference how you talk about things. And I'll explain why. And why does it matter? You need to map the political terrain when you're in a political battle. And we are in a political battle. And the battle has to do with the quality of science education. And to win the battle, you've got to think politically. And one of the things you have to think about is the opposition. What's the complex movement we're dealing with like? And if you want to have success in a political struggle, you need words to describe your opposition, to describe the actors, and to guide your strategy. And those words define groups as a concept. You have to conceptualize the groups. And it's always an approximation. It's never exact. And you've got to figure out how to have an approximate definition of the groups you're dealing with that's useful for the political purpose that you have at hand. And there are 4 tests of having good names for things and groups. The first test is persuading and framing and persuading the public that your side is the right side. An example of this is the word religious right was sometimes used in Kansas Citizens for Science propaganda. Well, it turned out studies show that religious right has positive connotations to people. They like the word religious, and a lot of people in Kansas are conservatives, so they like right. So if you say something religious right, they say, well, I must be for it. So it's much better to say radical religious right, and then they're not for it. So it makes a difference what word you use when you're trying to sell something. Now, the words you use need to be approximately accurate. Exact accuracy isn't possible, because we're talking big, gross groups of people that have something in common, but nobody exactly fits the stereotype. We're talking stereotypes in a sense. So an example is using fundamentalist for the radical religious right is factually wrong. It doesn't work. Not that they're not mostly fundamentalists, but because an awful lot of fundamentalists are not part of the radical religious right. So you don't want to confuse them. Then you need words that are useful for political strategizing. Born again is an example of a category that is not useful. Don't use it. Because we're not fighting born again Christians. Many born again Christians believe in evolution. Many born again Christians are creationists, but they don't particularly want to teach creationism in the school. They're not the group we're fighting. Finally, you need wide recognition in your words. Regressive is a pretty good term to describe the radical religious right and describe the radical right in general, but it's not a term that people get unless they're progressive. If you're progressive, you get regressive right away, but other people don't. So it doesn't work. You don't want to have private language because it just doesn't work very well. You need public language. You use the same language when you talk to people as when you're talking to yourself. You need to use the same language for strategizing that you use when you're making public statements to explain why people should support science education. So to do that, we need to be able to distinguish a bunch of different kinds of things.